I have always had a strange fascination with chickens. As a kid, I spent hours watching my grandfather's small poultry farm, learning how they lived, how they reacted to people, and how they were raised for business. That interest stuck with me even as I grew older. I didn't have a stable job, and I barely made ends meet by doing odd farm work. When I saw a night shift position open at a poultry farm with high pay, I immediately applied. I needed the money, and my knowledge of poultry farms made it seem like an easy opportunity. But I had no idea what I was walking into. A struggling poultry farm was hiring cheap labor because workers kept quitting or simply disappearing. The owner, desperate to keep things running, offered the high-paying night shift job. The moment I arrived, I noticed something was off. The manager, an old man with restless eyes and shaky hands, gave me an odd warning. Keep your head down, work fast, and don't look around too much. His nervous energy unsettled me. Why would he say that? Was it some kind of joke, or was there a reason for his paranoia? Still, I brushed it off and started my shift. The poultry houses were dimly lit, the air thick with the stench of birds. My job was simple: check the cages, clear out any dead chickens, and ensure everything was in order. The chickens were kept outside in an open area, and the farm stretched out into the surrounding woods, giving it an isolated, eerie feel. Late into the night, the rain started pouring. Heavy drops pounded against the metal roofs, and I had to hurry to get the chickens inside. If they got too wet, diseases could spread, and that was bad for business. As I rushed to herd them into the sheds, I felt a pair of eyes on me. I turned, expecting to see the manager or another worker, but no one was there. Just endless rows of cages in the darkness beyond. Later, I met another worker who had been there for a few weeks. He pulled me aside, lowering his voice. If you ever feel like someone is watching you, don't react. Just keep working. His face was pale, his hands trembling. His fear was real, and that disturbed me more than his words. The first night passed normally, but the second night was different. I arrived at the farm, went straight to the chicken shed, and began checking the cages. I bent down to remove a dead bird. I heard shuffling footsteps behind me. I assumed it was the manager or other worker and turned around to see, but no one was there. I forced myself to stay calm and ignore the bad feeling. I continued my work, sat with chickens, and cleaned their area. After completing my work, I went back to my small room near the poultry houses and sat on the chair to see that everything is all right and started using my phone. After 30 minutes, I noticed something strange: an ID card lying on the floor. The name on it wasn't familiar, but the face was. I had seen this worker in the hiring records, but he was listed as missing. I called the manager and told him someone had left their ID in my room. After long silence, he responded. His voice was tight. Just forget about it. Then he hung up. Something was very wrong. I was ignoring the straying things on poultry farm to save my job. I went back outside to check on the chickens. As I went inside the shed, I noticed that they were eating, like someone had fed them recently. Someone else was here. I decided to went inside my room and lock myself until morning. As I was moving outside the shed, I saw the hidden locked barn inside the shed. I had never noticed it before. It was set apart from the poultry houses, partially hidden behind tall grass and an old fence. I had an overwhelming urge to see what was inside. When I got close, I realized the door wasn't fully locked. With a gentle push, it creaked open, revealing a hatch in the floor. I climbed down carefully, with the help of my phone's flashlight. The underground room was humid, filled with a faint smell of rot and sweat. Then my light landed on something that made my stomach drop. Rows of cages, not for chickens, but for humans. And there I saw the missing workers. Their eyes were hollow, their bodies weak and bruised. Some had bandages, others had fresh wounds. One of them lifted his head and whispered, "Leave." My hands shook as I dialed the police. They told me to stay put and not go further in. But I couldn't leave them like this. I had to help. I tried to break one of the locks. I tried to talk with that worker, but he was in very bad condition. After some effort of talking to him, he finally spoke, "Leave, please." Then I heard a door open behind me. I froze and watched behind to the door. 3 men stepped into the room. One of them held a crowbar. Their faces were unreadable, their eyes dark with something I couldn't place. Then they lunged at me. Before they could reach me, the distant sound of police sirens cut through the storm, then turned and ran toward the woods. I scrambled out of the underground room just as flashing red and blue lights flooded the farm. The police stormed the place. The trapped workers were freed, and the farm was shut down. The next day, the police arrested the manager at the airport. He had been trying to flee the country. When interrogated, he refused to talk about what had been happening on the farm. But the evidence spoke for itself. The police discovered surgical tools, blood-stained tarps, and crates filled with documents linking missing persons to the farm. Their theory? Organ trafficking. Workers weren't just disappearing, they were being harvested. I had come to that farm because of my strange interest in chickens. But I had uncovered something much darker. The thought still haunts me. If I hadn't called the police in time, I would have been the next one locked inside a cage. What do you think really happened? Let me know in the comments. I read all your thoughts and reply. I served in the military for 23 years. After my retirement, I wanted something stable, something that kept me busy but away from danger. Poultry farming seemed like a good option, structured, manageable, and predictable. I bought a decent-sized farm on the village-type town and hired 2 workers to handle the daily tasks. It wasn't a gold mine, but it kept me occupied. One weekend, my wife and kids left to visit her parents in another city. With nothing to do at home, I decided to spend a few days at the farm, inspect operations firsthand, and perhaps fix some minor issues. Heavy rains were expected for the next 4 days, so I packed essentials, extra clothes, a flashlight, and an umbrella. On my way there, I called my workers to inform them of my arrival. Strangely, they didn't sound too thrilled. Their responses were brief, and there was an odd hesitation in their voices. After 2 hours of driving through the rain, I finally reached the farm. The 2 workers, John and Daniel, greeted me at the entrance. Their faces were stiff, their hands tucked inside their rain jackets. When I told them I planned to stay for 3 nights, they exchanged quick glances, and for a moment, I saw the color drain from their faces. It was as if they wanted to say something, but decided against it. I ignored the feeling and went straight to work, checking the shed and making sure everything was in order. Everything seemed normal. As night approached, John and Daniel came to me, suggesting I spend the night at their place in the nearby town. When I asked why, they avoided eye contact and simply insisted that it wasn't safe to stay alone. Their words felt heavy, but I wasn't the type to be scared off easily. If there was an issue, I'd rather face it head on. I told them I'd be fine. They gave me one last uneasy look before leaving. I watched them disappear into the rain, heading in the right direction toward their homes. Alone on the farm, the rain poured steadily. I locked my small sleeping room and drifted off by enjoying the rain sound outside. About 50 minutes later, I was jolted awake by an unusual sound of chickens. restless and agitated, their clucking growing into a frenzy. Thinking a stray dog or some other animal had broken in, I grabbed my flashlight and hurried to the shed. As I approached, I saw the metal lock on the shed door had been broken and the door was widely open. Not just forced open, but smashed with a single heavy blow. I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The entire shed was empty. Every single chickens are normally there. I checked the broken lock carefully. There were no signs of tools used, just a brutal, precise strike. Something about it felt off. My instincts told me to leave, but I wasn't about to abandon my farm just like that. I locked my room from the inside and waited for morning. At sunrise, I stepped outside. John and Daniel were already at work, acting as if everything was normal. I didn't mention what had happened at night. Instead, I walked to the shed. All the chickens were there, every last one. I fed them their morning diet and let them out for a walk, my mind struggling to process it. Had I imagined everything? Had exhaustion played tricks on me? I looked at the lock. It was brand new, untouched. I knew what I saw last night, but now it was as if nothing had ever happened. That night, after the workers left again, I forced myself to stay awake. The rain pounded against the roof, turning the ground into thick mud. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through my phone, checking emails, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the shed and the unsettling events of the night before. Then, just past midnight, as I was standing near my room watching shed and watching rain, I noticed that the light inside the shed flickered. It turned on, then off. Someone was inside the shed. I rushed outside, ignoring the downpour, and moved towards the chicken shed. When I reached the shed, my hands trembled as I grabbed the door handle. I yanked it open. I saw the chickens were gone. This time, I turned back, sprinting toward my room to grab my phone and call the police. As I neared my door, my heart nearly stopped. Through the rain-smeared window, I saw a tall person sitting on my bed with broad-shouldered. I stumbled backward. My pulse pounded in my ears. Who was inside my room? My hand shook as I reached for my phone, but then I made the mistake of looking up again. The figure moved. Slowly, it turned its head toward me. Even through the window, I could feel it watching me. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just sprinted to my car, fumbling with the keys. As the engine roared to life, I glanced at the farm through the rearview mirror. I saw shot. The figure was now outside, perched on the farm's stone wall, still watching. I drove through the rain, gripping the wheel tightly. When I reached my house, I quickly got out, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Locking the door behind me, I let out a shaky breath. The house felt eerily quiet. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a glass, and filled it with water. My hands were still trembling as I took a sip, trying to calm myself down. By the time the sun rose, I called John and Daniel. I told them everything. The chickens, the figure, the fact that someone was inside my room. Their response left me speechless. "The chickens are fine," John said, confused. "They're all here." I demanded a video call. When the screen lit up, I saw the shed full of chickens, clucking away like nothing had ever happened. I couldn't explain it. I had seen them disappear. For the next week, I barely slept. My appetite vanished. My mind kept replaying the scene. The empty shed, the figure in my room, the way it watched me. I couldn't stay at that farm anymore. A month later, I sold it. Whatever was going on there, I wanted no part of it. I never told the new owner about those nights, about the chickens that vanished and returned, about the silent figure watching me in the rain. Some things are better left unexplained. I had always enjoyed the quiet of the countryside, a much-needed escape from the fast-paced chaos of city life. My uncle's poultry farm, nestled deep in a rural area, seemed like the perfect place to clear my head. He had been managing it alone ever since his workers quit unexpectedly, and I figured my visit would be a good distraction for both of us. Packing my essentials, I grabbed some clothes, a flashlight, and an umbrella, as the news warned of heavy rain for the next few days. The farm was about 3 hours away, and my uncle's voice over the phone had sounded strange. His words were simple but unsettling. "Come quickly, and drive carefully." Something about his tone made me uneasy, but I brushed it off, assuming he was just tired from work. It was already raining by the time I hit the highway, and as I drove deeper into the countryside, the road became more difficult to navigate. The fog thickened, and my GPS started glitching. I relied on memory to guide me. An hour into the drive, I noticed something strange in my rearview mirror. A black car trailing me. Its headlights were off. I kept glancing back, waiting for it to overtake me, but it never did. Instead, it maintained the same distance, following my every turn. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. To test if it was intentional, I changed lanes slightly. The car mirrored my movements. A cold feeling settled in my chest. I sped up. So did the car. My heart pounded harder with every passing minute. The rain intensified, making it difficult to see. But just as I neared the farm's entrance, the black car abruptly swerved onto another path and disappeared into the fog. I exhaled deeply, trying to steady my nerves. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe I was overthinking. By the time I reached the farm, night had fallen. The property was surrounded by vast, open fields, and 2 large sheds housed the chickens. My uncle stood at the entrance, his expression unreadable. "You came alone, right?" he asked immediately. His question caught me off guard.
Yeah, why?
Instead of answering, he locked the gate behind me and muttered, "Someone's been coming here at night, watching." I froze. Who? I don't know, but I hear footsteps. Things move outside. Sometimes there's knocking, and in the mornings I find footprints. He rubbed his face tiredly. At first I thought it was an animal, but animals don't knock on doors. I forced a small laugh, trying to lighten the mood. Maybe it's just the wind. My uncle didn't laugh. After dinner, I went to my guest room. The sound of the rain against the roof was oddly calming, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. My uncle's paranoia was getting to me. Maybe he was just overthinking things. At some point, I dozed off. Then I woke up. I blinked, disoriented. The sound wasn't coming from the rain. It was coming from the window. Tap, tap, slow, deliberate knocking. I froze, my body instantly alert. The room was dark, but the curtains were slightly parted. My breath hitched as I turned my head toward the window. A figure stood outside. Tall, motionless, watching me. My heart pounded against my ribs. I couldn't make out a face, just a dark silhouette against the dim glow of the moon. The knocking had stopped, but the figure remained, standing unnervingly still. Then, slowly, it tilted its head to the side. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, it was gone. Vanished into the night. I didn't sleep after that. I sat upright in bed, gripping my phone tightly, my ears straining for any sound. I considered waking my uncle, but didn't want to seem paranoid. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe the shadows had played tricks on me. Morning came slowly. As soon as I stepped outside, I saw my uncle inspecting the ground near the house. His face was pale. "There are footprints," he muttered. I followed his gaze. The prints were fresh. They led from my window back toward the farm's entrance. But the gate was still locked. Whoever had been outside my window last night had already been inside the property before I even arrived. My uncle and I exchanged uneasy glances. Neither of us spoke about it, but I could tell we were both thinking the same thing. Who was watching us? And how had they gotten in? That night, I locked my room door and kept my flashlight close. I refused to sleep, my mind alert to every sound. The rain poured harder and the wind howled against the windows. Midnight came, and my uncle had already gone to bed. Then, soft, careful, right outside my door. I held my breath, gripping my flashlight tightly. My phone was in my other hand, ready to call for help. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. Silence. Then, knocking. 3 slow knocks. Deliberate. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay silent. The handle rattled lightly, as if someone was testing if the door was locked. My stomach twisted in fear. And then, nothing. Minutes passed. I didn't dare move. When I finally gathered the courage to check outside, there was no one there. But I knew someone had been. And whoever it was, they had wanted me to know they were there. Morning couldn't come fast enough. The next day, I told my uncle I was leaving early. He didn't try to stop me. He just gave a small nod like he had expected it. As I drove away from the farm, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. The farm faded into the distance, the rain blurring my vision. But just before I turned onto the highway, my blood ran cold. Standing far off near the entrance, barely visible through the fog, was a lone figure. Watching. I never looked back again.